IEBC sidelines Chair Chiloba in the changes. As it stands, the repeat election will be managed by 5 newly elected, elevated poll selection managers, rather, and this was announced yesterday. But many are asking, where does that leave IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba? Because we did not see his name among those who had been replaced, for the likes of the ICT director who has been replaced. What does that mean for Ezra Chiloba?
Technically, when you read through the story, the IEBC meeting which happened, it was very stormy, the plenary. And there seems that they were not able to gather consensus, because ideally it would have been very hard, because Kenya, we have labor laws, employment laws that regulate when and how someone can be arbitrarily sacked. Right. Okay. So I think the IEBC chair was in his position, being that he's a focal person. He was trying to be magnanimous. And he is aware, even some of the IEBC commissioners are aware that there were certain staff who were pinpointed. And the opposition party were not comfortable with them. So what he had done is like forward thinking. He had set up a project team, taking the rerun of the presidential election as a one-off project. And he has selected a team to be in charge of the various aspects of that election. So essentially this means that the CEO has earned himself a holiday. He's can do whatever he wants. He can travel. He's essentially off this project for now. For now, but he is still part of the IEBC. But he's still the substantive CEO. Nothing can change that. He has not been sacked. He has not been sent on compulsory leave. Right, so we have on page 5 here pictures of some of the new poll team managers, the likes of Marjan Hussein and Nancy Kariuki and Silas Rotich, and they will be taking up these new positions to run this election. But again, the opposition says it was not consulted. Is this selection of this team some of the issues that the IEBC should have ensured participation of all the parties involved? I think taking into regard the strict timelines and, time waits for no man, the ball is already within IEBC. The chairman was kind of anticipating as in which things, if you are able to do within the confines of the law, then they will be able to put themselves in a vantage point of carrying this election successfully. Fine, the opposition has lamented that they've not been consulted. That was within the IEBC. IEBC has the mandate to bring all parties on board, talk to them, make them involved to be part of this process. I think the underlying issue here and some of the vital questions that ought to be asked, fine, there's this project team. The other officials have been sidelined, but then there is the questions with regard to access. Do they still retain access? Do they still have those passwords which they had? Will they still have access to the election officials in the ground, the returning officers and such like? Because those are some of the issues that ought to be addressed. Because even if you're told that you're not part of this project, but behind the scenes, you still have some certain critical access. Right. Because there's still compromises. And remember, there was also the issue, apart from ungazetted polling stations, NASA also raised the concern of ungazetted polling officers as well. Exactly. So many questions have been asked as to how does IEBC arrive at the decision of these poll officers? Because, anybody can have an ulterior motive, really. But let's take a look at the top page of page 5 of the Standard. Court should have ordered a vote recount, says President Uhuru Kenyatta. So he now says that as much as he respects the decision of the Supreme Court, the court should have instead ordered a recount of the presidential vote to determine the winner instead of nullifying the entire election. This, of course, is a ship that has already left the dock, but is this an option that the court could have had? Not exactly, Michelle. When you look at the Constitution, the provisions that guide presidential petitions, where a presidential petition has been filed, and the issue touches on the credibility of the process, then the Supreme Court has one of two alternatives. Either if the evidence is not sufficient to prove that the credible was not processed, then it will confirm and validate that presidential election. But if, on the other hand, the evidence is overwhelming or it meets the threshold that that process was not credible, it did not meet the constitutional standards, then the only other option for the Supreme Court is to annul that presidential election and call for fresh. Because even if you are to order a recount, then that will be opening a Pandora's box. Recount where? Which constituency? Which areas? Because the magnitude of a presidential vote is enormous. Enormous. 40,000 polling stations. So a recount will not be visible, especially taking into account that the court has only a time frame of 14 days.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at page 6 of the paper, issues